You ever had a dream or a vision or an inner calling from the light inside you that no one ever understood? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. Welcome back to the I Paint Creatures IPC channel here on YouTube. Welcome to the beautiful Be Well forest. I'm out here today amongst all the spring bugs and mosquitoes. So if you see me, scattering them away, that's what's happening right there. But we're right in the middle of the Be Well forest. This was the original Sherwood Forest back in the Robin Hood, Errol Flynn days. And I've been broadcasting from here, bringing you these video logs about the making of the epic experience Matsu, the story experience Matsu. And today I want to talk a little bit about what Matsu, Tyko Tale, the funky eye puppets, and that whole adventure I went on when I first started penning them in poems and realizing it was this epic story that needed to be told. I basically ran into a lot of, naysayers, people, information, even fellow artists, even, collaborators, people who came across my path who just really didn't understand why I needed to do this, why I had so much conviction and inner knowing to go on this path. And so I wanted to talk a little bit how these stories, Matsu, Tyko Tale, the funky eye puppets, the whole 96542, the story of Shigin, they weren't just stories to me. They started out as portals, a way to see kind of in the illuminated self. And so they became lifelines. They taught me about tenacity and resilience and faith and conviction and the power of my inner knowing. So in the last couple of videos, I talked about a painted poetic symphony and poetry, not necessarily writing poetry, speaking poetry, rhyming poetry, the poetry of your inner voice, the one that talks directly inside of you. And it lets you know who I am and where I am. Because I'm always getting tagged from the outside world and it gets inside of me and it starts to identify who I am. And then I lose motivation, focus, and most of all, I lose my purpose, why I'm here on the planet alive. And so when I write these poetic tales, they become a compass. Like I talked about on the last video, each creature has a story stone. And that story stone is kind of in your third eye vision where you see inside yourself. You don't not necessarily see everything out here and you don't conform to all the patterns. You transform yourself through renewing of your mind. And the renewing of your mind comes from that poetic language that is originally yours, that talks to you in the dead silence of things. When everything's silent and calm, you can hear really who you are. And that's where the Matsu story came from. So today I like to talk about, tenacity is sticking to what you believe, no matter what external information, people, or how they judge how you're seeing this, and keep that tenacity so you can just persist with your inner strength and keep going with what you see with your poetic compass, your story stone inside yourself. And the second one thing is to keep that conviction, that unshakable belief, your vision and your values. It's why you do what you do, what motivates you. And what makes me wake up every day, every morning and keep that vision, even though sometimes it gets out of sight, it gets blurred by the outside world, information from the outside world, people from the outside world's opinions, other ways, especially a lot of social media where people always show you their shining moments, and it gets me out of distraction, a little out of focus. And so I have to keep that conviction to keep going and keep being aligned with my poetic compass and what it's telling me inside myself, what my story stone tells me. Next one is defiance, in a real positive sense. You got to stand firm against the judgment and disbelief. Even if it's this fantastical story that, the only way I can really relate it to people is what we're doing now, is we're making animations and we're making music and we're going to start streaming and showing our process of getting together with the few that understand my vision. and are inspired by my conviction and my defiance, from outside things that keep me from creating this. And most of all, it's the faith. And I'm not talking about religious faith. I'm just talking in the belief of seeing something that is unseen. The dream, what your poetic compass, your painted poetic symphony is telling you inside yourself in that stillness. When you find that time, you can just be with yourself. It's where the inner knowing comes out. And this is very spiritual to me because it's listening to your intuition, what your heart and soul says you're here to do on the planet and its purpose. And that's where the first video in this series, I think 4 or 5 videos ago, I talked about Matsu and how it's an acronym for Making Art Together, Supporting Unity. Well, that came from an inner knowing. That came from tuning my poetic compass, my story stone, and bringing it right back. And there's 2 principles that really apply this, right? Is resilience. Get your resilience. And how you get that motivated from your resilience is from your tenacity, your conviction, your defiance, your faith, and your inner knowing. You hear that poetic compass inside yourself if you really listen to yourself. And the resilience gets you to bounce back emotionally and keep that confidence, to keep doing this thing that no one else understands, but you see the vision very clear. And the second one is persistence. Showing up exactly who you are with all your might and your vision to know this is your purpose, and it keeps you going all the way down to, paying the bills, keeping the finances, keeping your mental health up, keeping your physical health up, feeling good about yourself in that vision, that purpose, because then it fulfills everything you desire in this lifetime. Well, I'm going to give you a couple examples inside the story of Matsu. The first one I talked about last time, which is Shigin. He's put in the hospital, and he's the young boy in the story of Matsu. He's put in the hospital, and they told him that he only has a certain time to live and that he's very ill, but they can't tell what the illness is or the disease. And so he finds himself, tossing and turning in a hospital bed and wondering, every morning they come in, they dress him up and they tell him that basically they don't know what's going on wrong, but he's very sick. But inside himself, that conviction he has inside himself, he's not sick. And so he finds his way by tuning his poetic compass, by shining his story stone that got tarnished by all the outside information that came pouring into him, of the people who don't understand his vision. So he paints and he writes these poems, and it starts to tell him about this fantastical journey that is in store for him in his life, his purpose, which basically eventually he heals and he gets back into life, and he starts to realize he is a yokai, a strange spirit, and he connects with these fantastical creatures. And he finds out that the Atomicon, who was one of the greatest yokai who ever lived, he exploded because he was getting too caught up in all the other outside, influences and identity that they were giving him. And so he left a whole bunch of all these other yokai without inspiration. He blew up the spirit world. And so that's another example of what I'm talking about today, of creating this vision, this inner story, that your purpose, what you're meant to do, besides, just get a normal job and do your normal thing, or, adhere to whatever the normality of keeping safe. This life is an adventure. So you have to get out there and really find deep inside yourself the light that shows you the way, what that poetic compass, guides you towards. And in the story of Matsu, there's a whole bunch of these creatures. And the first real example in the creatures is right after the Atomicon exploded, the spirit dimension disappeared on Earth. So a lot of the yokai, that was their fuel, because yokai, they don't need to eat or sleep. Their fuel is their strange spirits. So it's the spirit energy. In Matsu, I call it the ki, the life force energy inside them that inspires them to live their purpose and get up every day and go out and inspire other creatures and other human beings. Well, the spirit world disappeared. And so the 7 great kappa yokai, and the kappa are water creatures, and no one knew they could fly. They took to the air and they flew. and they gathered around the sun, and they started to carve the sun, and they created a portal. Just like the story of Matsu to me, a portal looking inside myself so I can see my purpose and my light, and I'm guided. And so that's another example. They created this portal, and then they allowed the rest of the yokai to follow them through the portal. And that's part of Tyko Tale, which we're working on right now. We've been meeting, and next week we're gonna start organizing some live streams so you can come in, and we're gonna show you our songwriting process. I do a lot of the lyrics, I do a lot of the melodies, and I've created a whole set of songs that tell the story of Matsu. And we're also getting into the animation. We're gonna use like Character Animator and Moho, the software, and start showing you how we integrate music and voiceover and all that into creating the epic story experience of Matsu. So let me know what you think. Explore this world of Matsu and Tyko Tale. There'll be a link to the project, and just keep coming back to the YouTube. And thank you all for watching the YouTube. That means so much to me. That shows that, you know, some of you understand this vision and this conviction I have, and the faith I'm holding, and this inner knowing to basically tell this story of Matsu. Tell your friends, start signing up. I'll put a link to the Patreon down below. I'm starting to gather that tribe again, because we're going to bring you more behind the scenes, introduce you to some of the artists that are collaborating with me, and reach out for your support on all levels. Level of financial support, and then support of just carrying on this vision, because this tale is amazing, and it's going to lead us, of course, to the Funky Eye Puppets. So it's going to be the next Muppets. The Funky Eye Puppets are into the funk, into high tech, into self-development and healing themselves from the Atomicon blast. And then, you know, the Atomicon blast, you know, I see it going on today. A lot of creativity and inspiration and people living purposely is kind of getting pushed wayside since we live in such an industrial society. But there's enough information that we're all sharing that can basically inspire us and bring out that inner knowing and get that tenacity fully going. So I want you to stay all resilient, stay persistent, keep showing up of exactly who you are, and check in with I Paint Creatures. Hit the subscribe. Thanks for your attention, and we'll be back next week with this type of video, these video blogs, and you'll start to see more content. Probably gonna come back to Twitch, gonna start streaming on Twitch and Patreon, and maybe do some things on Veeps. So we're gonna start exploring all this, so bring you along on this fantastical journey of the making of the epic story experience, Matsu. I Paint Creatures, IPC with the Funky Eye Puppets. We'll see you real soon.